Howdy folks, hope you've all had a good weekend, and welcome to another episode of Mingles with Jingles, this week once again sponsored by NordPass, more than just a password generator. New for November, special Cyber Month deal, you all know how this works by now. Go to nordpass.com/jingles and use code JINGLES to get 70% off a 2-year NordPass premium plan, plus an additional 1 month for free. As usual, this deal is only available for a limited time. Obviously, this isn't the first time I've done NordPass sponsorship, and it's not going to be the last either, because I use this product every day, and I do think it is really, really good. But if there's one consistent concern that does seem to pop up in the comments every time I do one of these sponsorships, it's the fear of what happens if you've put all of your security eggs into one NordPass basket, and then NordPass gets hacked. Because let's be real here, nobody's immune to being hacked. And big data management services are prime targets for hackers. Google gets hacked all the time, which is why it's incredibly dangerous storing all of your passwords and logins in your browser's autofill extension. Twitch very famously got hacked, a massive hack last month. Nord themselves got hacked a year or two ago. But the beauty of NordPass's zero-knowledge architecture is all of your data, all of your sensitive information is encrypted on your device before it reaches Nord's servers, where it's merely backed up and synced. So if Nord did get hacked, the only thing the hackers would get would be a load of encrypted data which would be useless to them unless they also had access to not just your devices but your stored encryption keys. And for this and many other reasons, I am entirely happy to recommend NordPass to you all. Once again, head to nordpass.com/jingles, use code JINGLES to get 70% off a 2-year NordPass premium plan plus 1 month absolutely free. So, where does that leave us? I've had quite a, well, I don't want to say busy weekend. I have been busy all weekend, but not really busy in that respect. I've been kicking the arse out of a couple of new games. One in particular, the other, Age of Empires 4. Where the hell did that one come from? I saw no advertising, no marketing, nothing. Suddenly, I'm browsing Twitch for something to watch, and boom, everybody's playing Age of Empires 4. I thought, the hell? Have they remastered Age of Empires? I just didn't realise it was a new game. I don't know if I've just been living under a rock or something, but it completely took me by surprise. So I've been playing some of that, and it is very, very good. I'm just not a fan of having to play as the French when you play through the campaign. Sorry, France, but, you know, don't worry, it's okay. The French understand. It's even worse if you're French, because at least as an Englishman, I got to play as the English first. Before having to play the French. The poor French have to play as the English before they get to play themselves. If you're playing through the campaign, that is. But yeah, very, very good game. And I love the way that they throw in a whole bunch of historical stuff as well. I mean, I say historical stuff. It's like Discovery Channel level of history. But it's better than nothing. So there's all kinds of like multimedia presentations that you can watch about the technology of the medieval era. So, you know, that's all really good stuff. But the game that I have absolutely been kicking the arse out of over the course of most of the weekend is this, Jurassic World Evolution 2. I think it's probably safe to say that as far as Jurassic World Evolution 2 is concerned, I've been waiting for this game to come out for a long time. I really enjoyed the first one. It has not disappointed. There is enough new features in here, because that's the thing. When you're doing a sequel, it has to be similar enough to the first game so that people know they're playing a sequel. But there has to be enough differences so that they don't just feel like they're being overcharged for what should have been DLC. And I think they've struck the right balance. But at the same time, I also want to go on record as saying that they could have probably spent another month or just a couple of weeks playtesting the various different modes, particularly the Chaos Theory mode, where you go back and rebuild all of the parks featured in the various different Jurassic Park movies. Because this game has been the source of some of the best enjoyment, while simultaneously also providing some of the most fingernail-pulling frustration I have ever experienced in a game in recent memory. What do you mean, Jingles? Oh, I'm so glad you asked. Allow me to give you some examples.
Become famous for
Although,
dinosaurs.
first I should
It's
probably
not quite the
qualify that
way we
statement,
want.
because the
Hopefully, working together,
the
we can change
challenge
that.
modes are actually
So,
totally
I'd like to
playable,
introduce myself.
and
George Lamb,
present enough of a
security person.
challenge to be
Our
entertaining
challenges are clear.
without being
Let's
frustrating.
not waste any
At
time.
least so far. I've only completed the first challenge mode, the Canada Park, which you can see here.
I'm confident you can handle this
The
next
Chaos
adventure.
Theory modes, however,
Don't prove me wrong.
oh boy. So, Chaos Theory in this game is where you go back to all the various different parks that were built in all the various different movies and try to do them again, but properly this time. The first one being the original Jurassic Park. Now, because Dr. Henry Wu is an utter psychopath, he insists that the first dinosaurs you're going to breed are going to be velociraptors. This is right at the start of the Jurassic Park Chaos Theory game mode. The problem, actually there are a lot of problems, is that you only have 54% of the velociraptor genome, and you have to complete this step before you get the opportunity to unlock dinosaur fossil expeditions, where you can actually improve the genome and increase your chances of successfully being able to produce viable dinosaur eggs. So with only 54% of the raptor genome available, probably half of the eggs that you synthesize are going to go wrong and they're not going to be viable. But you do only need 2 velociraptors, so with a clutch size of 6, the chances are good that you're going to get at least 2 eggs. However, velociraptors are little bastards, and any eggs that you successfully synthesize have an extremely high chance of producing velociraptors with some very negative traits. I mean, raptors go after park ranger jeeps, given half the chance anyway, and if you're breeding from eggs that have inherited the aggressive trait, they are guaranteed to go after every vehicle that enters their enclosure, and it costs you $50,000 to replace every Ranger Jeep that you lose, so you don't really want to be breeding from eggs that have negative traits. And here's the kicker. Usually, every time I synthesized a clutch of raptor eggs, I would get 4 viable eggs. And 4 eggs would have cost me $450,000 to synthesize. Now, once the eggs have successfully synthesized, that's when you find out what kind of traits the eggs have inherited. And the kind of negative traits that raptors can get include things like antisocial and aggressive, which means they will constantly be fighting each other, running up medical bills, healing them, and repairing the ranger vehicles that they destroy. So you don't want to be breeding raptors with negative traits. They're utter bastards when they're 100% content. You don't want to make them any worse. But the thing is, it's only after you've paid the $450,000 to synthesize the eggs, and you get to the point where you decide whether or not you're going to incubate them further, it's only at that point where you see what kind of traits the eggs have. Yeah, so you pay your money, and only then you find out whether or not you've been ripped off. 5 times in a row, I synthesized nothing but raptor eggs with negative traits at $450,000 a pop. Having already played through the Jurassic Park Chaos Theory mode and failed after about 3 hours because I just ran out of money, I already knew right at the start that there was no way I was ever going to get this done because I just did not have enough money left. So I ended up right at the point where I started synthesizing the first raptor eggs, creating a save game, which I called Fuck Raptors. And over and over and over until I got at least 2 eggs, and it took about 20 minutes of saving and reloading until I got just 2 eggs with no negative traits. That's what I had to do in order to even begin that game mode with a chance of completing it. Now, Frontier, if you're listening, you probably aren't, but on the chance that you are, I'm just saying, maybe you should tune the odds of producing viable eggs with no negative traits at the beginning of what is likely to be one of your most popular game modes, so that people aren't required to spend upwards of $2.25 million of their starting capital before getting some eggs they can actually breed from, and then, assuming that nothing else goes wrong, they make no more mistakes and RNG doesn't screw them over any further, then spending the next 3 or 4 hours playing before realising that they were never going to have enough money. Thanks to those early failures, never going to have enough money to finish this game mode successfully. I'm just saying that might be a good idea. Of course, that's not the only thing that can and will go wrong. Again, because the Jurassic Park version of the Chaos Theory game mode more or less mirrors the events of the first movie, you end up with your Triceratops, which you also have to breed, because they had Triceratops in the original Jurassic Park. They come down with ivy poisoning. So right after you've satisfied all of the other criteria to open the park and actually start making money, because you're doing nothing but hemorrhaging cash up until that point for the first few hours of this game mode, right at the point where you're ready to open the park, suddenly one or more of your Triceratops comes down with ivy poisoning. And again, this mirrors the events of the movie, because when Laura Dern and Sam Neill's character turned up, one of the Triceratops was suffering from ivy poisoning, and Laura Dern correctly identified that that was what was wrong with it. So you need to come up with a cure. And you cannot open the park while you have sick dinosaurs. Yeah, remember that. That's actually going to be quite important. So I had at least one Triceratops down with ivy poisoning, and that opens up the ability to research the cure for ivy poisoning, so you can send your mobile vet unit out to treat them and eradicate all disease from the park, and then you can open and actually start making money. Now, at this point, after several abortive attempts to even get this far, during which most of the time I just ran out of money, but because I'd done the whole save right at the beginning before you waste millions and millions of dollars trying to get viable raptor eggs, I'd actually made it to this point with about $4 million to spare. So, it's all good. So I researched the cure, I'm about to deploy the cure, and then RNG decided that I was going to get a storm. So I had to suspend all operations and wait the storm out. The Triceratops are getting sicker and sicker by the second, but eventually the storm passed, and I was able to medicate the 3 sick Triceratops that I had and eradicate all sources of ivy poisoning from the park. Except, during the storm, because it was so cold and wet and windy, all of my Struthiomimus, my chicken lizards, came down with the common cold. And there is no cure for the common cold, you just have to wait it out and hope they get better. But that's okay, because all I had to do was eradicate all sources of ivy poisoning from the park, yeah? Well, yeah, except the progress indicator in the bottom right corner of the screen didn't say, ensure that there are no further cases of ivy poisoning. It said, ensure there are no sick dinosaurs in your park. And I had 7 sick chicken lizards. And because it was just a common cold, there was nothing I could do about it. So I just had to sit there, waiting for days and days and days, hemorrhaging money on park upkeep with no income, because I couldn't open the park until there were no sick dinosaurs in the park, waiting until they got better, and hoping that nothing else went wrong. Several days and several $1 million later, and I'm looking at the bank balance and it's starting to get alarmingly low. I need to open this park soon or I'm going to fail the scenario again. And eventually, there were no further cases of common cold in the park. Hooray! Except not hooray, because what had actually happened was that of the 7 chicken lizards that had the cold, 2 of them had gotten over it. The other 5 had come down with pneumonia. And guess what? I didn't have a cure for pneumonia either. So I just had to sit there for even longer, hoping that one of 2 things was going to happen. They were either going to get over their pneumonia and survive, or preferably it was going to kill them quickly, so I would no longer have any sick dinosaurs in the park, and I'd be able to open. Guess what happened? Ran out of money. Failed the scenario again. At which point I simply said, Chaos Theory can kiss my arse. Quit back to the main menu, fired up the challenge mode in Canada, and spent most of Sunday in fact right before recording this episode of Mingles with Jingles, building a perfect 5-star park in Canada, which you can see now, and just spent several thoroughly enjoyable hours unlocking everything in challenge mode rather than in chaos theory. Because the thing is, if you want to play in sandbox mode in Jurassic World Evolution 2, which is probably where I'm going to be spending most of my time, just building the park of my dreams and trying out all kinds of weird and wonderful things in sandbox mode, but you can't actually use anything in sandbox mode unless you've already researched or unlocked it in either chaos theory or challenge mode. So that's what I did. Challenge mode, which is way more enjoyable and far less frustrating. But anyway, enough about Jurassic World. Let's answer some questions from the Salt Mines Discord server. There were a couple that caught my attention. Some of them I answer there and then in the Discord. Others I save for Mingles with Jingles, and this is one of them. This is a World of Warships related question from Defiant. He said, "So, Evil One, quick World of Warships question. I'm over the 200,000 coal mark, and I'm now facing a problem. Do I stop at 228,000 coal and get the Tier 9 Tulsa Premium Cruiser? Or do I continue on to get the 240,000 coal needed for the Tier 10 USS Salem Premium Cruiser?" So for the benefit of those of you who don't play World of Warships, this is the problem that Defiant's looking at. You can either get the slightly cheaper USS Tulsa or the slightly more expensive USS Salem. So what's the difference between the Tulsa and the Salem, aside from one of them being Tier 9 and the other one being Tier 10? Well, quite simply, the Tulsa is basically a sort of budget version of the Salem. They're both ships armed with 8-inch guns, and those 8-inch guns have autoloader mechanism for a very, very fast rate of fire. The problem is the Tulsa only has 6 guns. The USS Salem and its sister ship, the non-premium Tier 10, the USS Des Moines, have 9 guns, and this makes a big difference. Also, the Tulsa's firing range is kinda shit. So, you're only saving 12,000 coal, and you're getting a ship, if you get the Tulsa, that is just not very good. It's only 12,000 more coal for the Salem at Tier 10. You get 3 more guns, an extra kilometre of firing range, and a very, very good heel. It's just an all-round better ship, and it's only 12,000 more coal. So my recommendation would be to skip the Tulsa entirely, save the coal, and get the Salem. It's a great ship. You will not regret it. Next question comes from Zwifty, and he says, "Why did you leave South Africa?" I should probably take this opportunity to point out to everybody who's thinking, "What, Jingles is South African?" No, I'm not. I'm British. But I did live in South Africa for 4 years, between 1982 and 1986. To continue with the question, why did you leave South Africa? He said, probably an obvious answer given its current state, and would you ever go or come back? Well, like I said, I left South Africa in 1986, so the current state of the country was not a factor. Also, because it was 1986, I was 16 years old at the time, so the decision wasn't down to me. We weren't actually living in South Africa at the time. We were living in Swaziland, which is the last kingdom in all of Africa. Although myself and my sister went to boarding school in South Africa in the Transvaal, a place called Barberton. But the whole family moved back basically because my parents were getting homesick. If it had been up to me, I would have never left because I was absolutely loving every minute of being at boarding school. But of course it wasn't up to me, so in 1986 the whole family moved back to Newcastle upon Tyne in the northeast of England. Funny story, if you take somebody from Newcastle upon Tyne in the northeast of England with a very distinctive Geordie accent and you send them to South Africa, nobody can understand a word that they're saying. And if that person then spends 4 years in southern Africa, having his accent diluted, by the time he returns to the northeast of England, everybody there seems to think you're from Australia. Apparently, if you take a Geordie accent and a South African accent and mix them together, you get an Australian. Or at least that's what everybody in school thought. Wait a minute, how does a high schooler in the northeast of England in 1986 know what an Australian sounds like in the first place? Well, one, they didn't, obviously. But also, that was around about the time when Australian daytime soap operas were all the rage on British television, shows like Neighbours and Home and Away. And so that's what they all thought I sounded like. Anyway, on that bombshell, I think that's about it for this week's episode of Mingles with Jingles. I hope you've enjoyed it, and as always, take care, stay safe, and I'll catch you next time.